Hi, it's Andy. Just popping up to tell you that we will be here live from 7 o'clock this evening. See you then. Hi, it's Andy. Just popping up to tell you that we'll be live here from 7 o'clock this evening. See you then. Hi, it's Andy, just popping up to tell you that we'll be live from 7 o'clock this evening. See you then. Hi, it's Andy again, just popping up to tell you that we'll be live from 7 o'clock this evening. See you then. Hi, it's Andy again, just popping up to tell you that we'll be live from 7 o'clock this evening. See you then. Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Andy Shed Live. This is, I think it's episode 19 now we're up to of this season, and it is Sunday the 15th of December 2024. A little bit different tonight, as you will probably see. You might notice some differences in the picture quality and the audio quality and that today. I'd be interested to know what you think, if it's better, if it's worse or whatever, because we are on a brand new system here. As you know, we had a computer crash a couple of weeks ago which caused absolute havoc, and we're just getting it all up and running again. And the software that we use, a thing called OBS, we've had to reinstall it on. Of course, when you reinstall it, it's a new version and it works differently, or sometimes doesn't work at all, as we found with some of it. So we've had a few issues with it, shall we say, today. But it is working now, and we are up and running. The chart's not on the screen at the minute because we've not had a chance to set that up yet. After Christmas we'll have that back on the screen. Loads of people are in the chat. I'm just having a look who we've got. Look at me on the old phone here. We've got Dominic here. Dominic's in the chat. Wesley's in the chat. Dominic says he just moved into his new place, so congratulations, Dominic. He says, I'll have to look in the box containing the phones to see if they're all made it in one piece. Let's hope they have, Dominic. If they haven't, then it'll make an interesting episode. Probably maybe we could repair one. If they've not made it in one piece, maybe that would make an interesting episode. Christopher is with us. Gambo's with us. Says, hi peeps, got away early from work, so made it home in time today. Wow, excellent. He says, congrats on your new abode, Dominic. Yeah, they're all saying happy new home and whatnot to him. Nev's here as well. Hi, Neville. Yeah, more or less a full house tonight, I think, there. While I remember, somebody asked me to transfer information the other week. Somebody asked me to pass on phone numbers and things. Do us a favour, send me an email again, because I've lost a blooming email of who it was asking me to transfer to who. I have a feeling one of the parties involved was Dominic, but I can't remember who the other was. Was it Arthur or was it Gambo? Just drop me a line and remind me who it was, please. Right, and all those for you who used to be Patreons of the channel here, the Patreon is now shut down. There's an interesting story behind the closing down of Patreon. I should probably have done it earlier, because it turns out there's $260 something in the Patreon account. I withdrew it and I shut the thing down, and it paid it into my PayPal account, but it paid it into my PayPal account in US dollars instead of in British pounds. And my PayPal account thinks it's empty because my PayPal account is set up in British pounds. So it shows us $260 there, but can you get it out? Can you? Eckers-like, as they say around here. So I'm still working on that one, but it is there, and I will find a solution to it eventually. I did get in touch with PayPal customer services. I spoke to some woman in Mumbai or somewhere who was obviously typing what I said into a computer and then just reading it off a screen. So she was about as much use as the proverbial chocolate fire guard. But we'll sort it. We will sort it. There will be a new way for you to support us in the new year when we get it set up. Basically what's going to be happening, we're going to be taking a break next week. We're not on next week, but we will be on in our traditional slot on Christmas Eve, hopefully. Yeah, right? Christmas Eve we will be on our traditional slot at some point on Christmas Eve, all be well. I can't tell you exactly when yet because I don't know, but subscribe on YouTube and hit the notifications thing, so it notifies you when we're on, and then you'll know when we're going to be on Christmas Eve, and I'll try and let you know before it all happens as well. Chris says, Anthony, did you see the photos of my telecom room? No, Christopher, I've not seen anything yet because of the computer crash. So I'm still getting things all back to normal. They're probably here somewhere, but because we had the big computer crash, basically it wiped everything out, which is why it all looks a bit weird today, and why there was no clock and things like that. And because to get all these things back takes a while, shall we say. Also, I've been having a bit of a tidy up around here, and a bit of a clear out, and I got a plastic box, a big plastic box, full of foam bits and pieces, and I thought I'll go through that box and see exactly what's in it. I thought I'd done it before to see exactly what was in it, but I have discovered some interesting things. Probably the most interesting of which, if I can get a camera on it, probably the most interesting thing is this. Now, do you know what that is? Yes. That is the thing that people have been telling me about for years, and I've never even actually seen one. But do you know what this is? Wesley will know, I'm sure Wesley will know. It's a genuine, as far as I can tell, a genuine dial opal sucker. So, the theory works like this. If I can, first you have to sort of dampen the sucker. So make sure the sucker is sort of damp, like that. Then you take your telephone, this one that we're turning to the upside down phone because it's near to me, and it just fits nicely over the opal in the middle, and you pulls it off. Dead easy though, and then it falls off. But it's exactly the right size to fit the opals, this thing. I'll put that back on, shove it on. There you go, it's off. One shot. And now I can't get the sucker off the opal. That's it. But there you go. So yeah, a dial sucker. A dial sucker. We thought that was quite good. I thought, hey, I know what that is. I thought I've never actually seen one in the flesh before, but as soon as I saw it, I thought, I know what that is. And sure enough, I do know. Hang on, I can hear something. Oh, I know what I can hear. That. Right. That stopped it. Alright. So yeah, so that is the dial sucker. I've also acquired some other things, which you will see. Yeah, I've acquired some of these. Now, somebody will know the name for these. I don't know the name for these. as it says, it's a thing for dial center removal. But these are kind of, I'm wanting to call them a strain gauge, but they're kind of not really a strain gauge. What they are is a thing you set. You can see a little sliding scaly thing there. I don't know if you can see that. That moves up. If I turn that, and it alters the tension on this. It's getting much harder to move that now. And what this is for setting the spring tension and that in relays and stuff. So I'm guessing you just sort of put it against your relay spring like that, set it to the correct tension, and whether this moves or whether the spring in the relay moves tells you whether they've got the right tension or not. And I've got various ones in various colours. See, that's really hard to move now. If I set it down the other way, there's a little thing there where my thumbnail is that is moving down. So if I set it right down the other end here, now it's really easy to move. And there's different ones with different tension, but this one is slightly different to the others. So I don't think they're set in any way, shape or form. This is a PO number 4, this particular one, but then I've got others. What was this one? Made in England by the General Electric Company. It says on that there. But these ones, you notice, have got a different end on them, and that's because this is kind of like a socket end, and the bit that goes on the end, unfortunately, is missing. It's stored in a little clip here, so it's missing off that one. It's missing off that one, but I've got it on this one, and to show you what it is, you see, that moves like that, and in this little clip thing on the side here, I can pull this out, and this then will clip in here like that, and it gives you a kind of little flat end thing to use. And I'm guessing the length of this is crucial for how much force you have to put on it. And then to get this out of here, there's a little bit sticking out there. I'll just push in with my thumbnail and jiggle it a bit, and in theory it comes out. It did yesterday when I tried it. There it goes. There we go. It's stiff because it hasn't been used for years and years and years, probably. But yeah, that is the thing. I'm not sure what that bit's for in there. But there you go. And that's how I found it, like that. So yeah, I found some of those. So not sure if they're a full set. But yeah. Bills is with us. He says, hello Andy and everyone. Great to be on. I've been busy with work, so nice to catch up. Yeah, nice to see you as well, Bills. Arthur's with us as well. He says hello. Bill says, is this a spring tensioner? Well, yeah, I think they are, Bills. I think that's exactly what they are. Sort of things. I think you just sort of use them to measure the tension of your spring. I can hear a barking dog. Just bear with me one moment while I sort out. I'm back. Had to let the doggy out. He's had his tea, you see, so he wanted to go outside. Goes in the front end, it has to come out the back end. So yeah, we've got one or two tools and things that we found in the bottom of this box. I thought it was quite interesting the other day. Dominic said he's moving some boxes while he watches. How far did you move them? Says Bills. Dominic says I've cancelled the landline, so probably switch to CNET. Yeah, I've got to get that working. Hopefully over Christmas I'm going to get CNET back up and running over the Christmas gap. Because it's one of the few things that you can do over Christmas, really, isn't it? Arthur says, I fancy the CNET thing, but I don't know anybody else who's on it. I'm on it, Arthur. I'm on it, and Christopher's on it when it's working. Yeah. Wesley says, did you get anywhere with that street lamp? Bill says, Andy, I would like to call you on my Bakelite 200, please. You can't ring in on a normal phone because we've got no way of putting it through onto the show bills. But Wesley, the street lamp. Was it this street lamp you're on about, Wesley? You don't get bulbs like that anymore. You don't get bulbs anymore, do you? Despite it being a bit black down this end, you may notice, I believe this works. Yeah, this is a mercury vapour lamp, I think. No, not a mercury, a sodium vapour lamp. A sodium vapour lamp. There, so it's got that nice orange glow to it that we're missing now from street lights. Don't even get me started on the useless street lights that we have now got in this country. The useless LEDs, the birdless charter, as I call them. Because it used to be years ago, well, not that many years ago actually, it used to be that your street lights shone and illuminated the street, and like illuminated the front of all the houses as well, just a little bit, so you could just kind of make out what was going on in the garden and stuff. Now you can't make anything out at all. It's absolutely rubbish now, because it's LEDs and they only shine downwards. So the days of being able to not have your bedroom light on because you've got enough of a glow from the street lamps to see what you're doing and that, gone. I've put the bedroom light on now. But the street lamps don't even light up the street though now. They're so poor. They're just not bright enough. And I've heard that a lot of the local councils have got the ability to turn them down, and they do. So a lot of them are only running at about 80%. It's absolutely insane. Wesley says, the street light you were putting in your garden. No, I've not done it yet, Wesley. I've got to go and fetch the lamppost still for it. Bill says, the LED street lights keep me up at night. The glare. Glare? Glare? They barely even glow. How can there be a glare? They don't shine any blooming light out. Unless you're laid directly underneath one, staring straight up at it, then they probably do. But unless you've got different lights to what we have around here, well, the ones around here are rubbish. Neville says, I find them very distracting when driving. Why though? You can't. You guys must have got different lights to what we have around here, because the ones around here, you literally can't tell that they're on. When you go down the road, they only shine downwards. They've got a thing on, they can't shine upwards. They don't even shine out sideways, and when you look at one of these lights from the side, you can't tell it's on. It's absolutely balmy. Wesley says, what sort of lamppost is it? Is it cast iron? It is, Wesley. I've got two actually, and they're both cast iron. One is a fairly standard one with the sort of lines down it. You probably know what I mean if you know your street lights. And then I've got a very different one that I've never seen one of anywhere before, and apparently they were used in Derby, but I got it from a back garden in Birmingham. Neville says, they're distracting because they're the same colour as headlights. Yeah, maybe we ought to go back to having yellow headlights on as cars like they did in the 70s. Can you remember those 1970s cars that had yellow headlights? Christopher says, I set up my old 1995 Mercury Vapour lamp in my new backyard. Excellent, Christopher. Is that the Mercury Vapour? They are white, aren't they? They're not orange. Mercury. I think they glow white. Wesley says, I can't see why I want to turn them down. I'm sure they're on unmetered supplies. I think they turn them down so they don't have to replace the bulbs in them, the LED bulbs in them. I think that's why they do it. But in Sheffield they went on about them saving a lot of money. It might also be the fact that they got a lot of stick in Sheffield for ripping out the Victorian cast iron lampposts that had originally been gas lamps and sticking modern street lamps in their place. Where what they could have done, they could have just put a modern lamphead on the Victorian gas post, and they went, oh, health and safety, we can't use the Victorian lamppost, it might give somebody an electric shock. Well, it's not given anybody an electric shock for the last 100 and something years, has it? I don't think it's going to start now. But, oh no, health and safety, we've got to put new lampposts. It's a firm called Kilios Amy, working on behalf of Sheffield City Council. And basically, what's the difference between Sheffield City Council and a coat hanger? Answer, a coat hanger's less bent. Sheffield City Council. Yeah. I could say a lot about various councils at the moment. Like having a good fight with a local council. Now once got to a stage where one member of Sheffield City Council, if she saw me at an event, she went to like a fete, like a village fete thing in one of the suburbs of Sheffield once, and she was going to open it, this council, and because she saw me in the crowd, she wouldn't get out of the car, and she cleared off and didn't open the gala thing. Yeah. I thought, I've arrived. If I can have that effect on councillors, I've arrived. Arthur says, I bought a box for CNET, but haven't tried it out yet. Wesley says, I still have sodium in the backyard here. Cool, Wesley. Absolutely brilliant. Dominic says, Andy, have you heard of Blackpool Transport suspending their heritage trams? I've put a link in the GPO telephones forums. Yeah, we covered this last week, Dominic. Were you not here last week, Dominic? Perhaps you weren't here last week. Yeah, right. The Blackpool Trams saga. Where do I begin? Once upon a time there was a woman called Jane Cole, who woke up one morning and decided she wanted to be a transport manager. She had very little experience and even less idea, but she went to Blackpool and said, can I run your tramway please? And the people at Blackpool, not knowing of Jane Cole, went, yes, certainly, have a go. Needless to say, this story did not have a happy ending. Yes. Blackpool Transport Department has had many managers looking after the trams over the years. Probably the most famous of which was Walter Luff, who introduced the streamliners in the 1930s, the double-deckers and single-deckers, some of which are still in service today, or at least were until a couple of weeks ago. After Walter came a chap called Joe Franklin, who was much more conservative than Walter, and kind of reined in some of Walter's ideas a bit, because Walter got a bit carried away in the 1950s and introduced some new single-deck trams called Coronations, which were not entirely successful due to the fact they were built entirely out of steel, and they weighed about the same as a small country. So they used to break axles, burn out motors, all sorts of things, and they had a fairly experimental control system called VAMBAC, Variable Automatic Multi-Notch Braking and Acceleration Control. So Joe de-VAMBAC'd a lot of the Coronations and invested in the older fleet. He spent money on the balloons that hadn't had any money spent on them for years, and because Luffy had moved on from them and decided they were old hat double deckers, he thought the future was single deckers. Well, Joe refurbished the balloon cars in the 50s and 60s. And then we move on, and the next manager along is a chap called Tony DePledge. And I met Tony DePledge. I knew him quite well at one point, because I had a summer season working for Blackpool Transport and used to see him around, and he'd say, "Oh Tony, how are you?" And Tony was okay as well. I never met Luffy. I never met Joe Franklin, unfortunately. I'd like to have met Joe Franklin. But I did meet Tony DePledge, and Tony DePledge kept the tramway going at a time when there were no other tramways in the UK, no thought of there being tramways coming back, and he made sure that they kept all the skills in-house and had all the facilities to do all the maintenance, and basically did everything in-house, including in the mid-1980s building some brand new one-man operated trams to run the Fleetwood service that you may know as the centenary cars. Then, I don't know if there was another manager for a short time in between, but then along comes Jane Cole. And my mother always said, if you can't say anything nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. So, moving on, next subject. The Blackpool tram debacle that has been over the last couple of weeks is down to a statement that they put on the Heritage Tram Tours website that said with immediate effect they were withdrawing all the heritage services because it was becoming increasingly difficult to run them, and the modern trams as well. For increasingly difficult, read can't be bothered, yeah? Because when they say, oh, you can't run old trams and modern trams together, go and look at Prague, go and look at San Francisco, go and look at all kinds of places. Even Sheffield Supertram have done it. They had a works car that they got from Europe that they had for a while, one of the same batch that is the Access Tram at Cryde, and that ran in Sheffield as a works car for a while on the Supertram system. There are lots of places around the world where old trams and new trams share the same tracks quite happily. And then they say, oh, but the problem is in Britain, it's the Office of Road and Rail, which is what they now call the Railway Inspector. That's what gives us the problem, we can't do it in Britain. Well, you know, the Office of Road and Rail is responsible for road vehicles, and last I heard you could still drive your classic car down the road with your modern car. Last I heard there were still steam trains out on the mainline network running with the modern vehicles. Why shouldn't you be able to do it with the tramway? I strongly believe it is Blackpool Transport that cannot be bothered, and I think one of the problems that they're having is that if they were to run a heritage service, a proper heritage service running all day every day, along with the modern, let's call them LRVs, it's the most the best name I can give them. I can give them lots of names like Purple Peril or Bionic Caterpillars or Promenade Death, or yeah, but Let's call them the LRVs. I think the problem is, if they ran LRV heritage car, LRV heritage car, LRV heritage car, what would happen would be all the people standing at the tram stops in Blackpool would wave the LRVs past, because everybody who goes to Blackpool wants to ride on a heritage tram. So they'd be waving the LRVs past, and these LRVs, they spent millions upon millions upon millions of your pounds on, because Blackpool Transport ain't paid for them. You've paid for them through government grants that have been given to them at Blackpool. If they ran the heritage cars alongside them, Blackpool Transport would end up with egg on their face, because nobody would use the LRVs and everybody would use the heritage service, and so they aren't giving you an opportunity to do that. I said ages and ages ago, years and years and years ago, when this all first happened, when this so-called upgrade happened in Blackpool, I said, you run a Flex Shitty. Yeah, that is how you pronounce it, Flex Shitty. You run a Flex Shitty LRV, and I'll follow you with a balloon car with only one conductor on it. You don't really need two, although they do have two conductors on balloons, one downstairs and one upstairs. I'll follow you with a balloon car with me on as one conductor. Let's see which takes the most money. Bear in mind, I'll even let the LRV go in front. Let's see at the end of the day which one takes the most money. Now, despite the fact that I was trained by Blackpool Transport as a guard, I could go back there tomorrow and be a guard. Nobody's took me up on that offer. Funny that, isn't it? So come on, Jane, put your money where your mouth is. If you think these LRVs are so brilliant, then let me come back with a blue, with a decent driver, and run behind them all day, from like first tram in the morning to last tram at night. None of this no heritage before 9 o'clock business and no heritage after 4 o'clock. All day, and let's see who comes back with the biggest pot of money for the company at the end of the day, because I think it'll be me. But of course that's very embarrassing, having spent millions of public pounds on these LRVs that nobody wants and or needs, and so they're going to make you use the LRVs whether you want to or not. Well, from what I've seen on my visits to Blackpool, people are deciding not, because I keep hearing certain people saying, oh, the North Station service is brilliant, it's absolutely packed, the North Station service. It's absolutely packed because they're running every bloody tram via North Station now. So to go down the promenade, to go from Fleetwood to Stargate, you've got to go via sodding North Station and have 10 minutes onto your journey. That's why it's packed on North Station, but nobody's getting on there and nobody's getting off there, because quite frankly, if you want to go from the promenade to North Station rather than wait for a tram, it's faster to walk, as we proved in the summer when Gambo, Dominic and myself actually went. Unfortunately, we went just 2 or 3 weeks before the service started, but they were doing dry runs. They were actually running vehicles up Talbot Road, but just not with passengers on. And basically we walked between the promenade and North Station faster than the tram got there, because it's a couple 100 yards, you know, the distance is so inconsequential. For them to have spent those millions and millions on this North Station extension, you know, it's an extension that's not as long as some people's gardens. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Dominic says the new trams are very uncomfortable. Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. It's because they're four-wheelers. As they are in a lot of places. Basically, bogie trams ride better than four-wheelers. That's just a fact. That's just a fact of physics. If you've got 8 wheels on 2 bogies underneath a fixed chassis, then those wheels undulate and move a bit on their springs, and they kind of iron out any sort of irregularities in the track. If you've only got 4 wheels rather than 8, where one of those wheels hits a bit of a bump in the track or something, or a bad joint, you know about it because there's not another wheel at the side of it to kind of help even it out. It's just that one wheel, and it cocks the tram open and you're rattling about and that. Go and try it at Christ. Go and try it at Christ. Pick a bogie car and have a ride up the line. Then pick a four-wheeler and have a ride up the line and feel the difference. Now, somebody in their infinite wisdom, when they were designing modern trams, thought, let's take 3 four-wheelers and then let's take 2 sections with no wheels under them at all, put them between the wheel sections, and let's have all these concertinas, you know, like a bendy bus, and call that a tram. And they thought, if the bogies don't have to rotate, we can have a lower floor all the way through, because the bogie doesn't have to rotate. So we've only got to have the floor just skimming the top of the axle, where people can walk through. So people are walking between the back of the wheel and the axle, basically. Now, if that was a bogie and it rotated, the wheel would rotate round and come into the tram through the floor. But because it's a four-wheeler, they thought we can have a low floor throughout. Right? Something they didn't do in Sheffield. Sheffield's the bogie cars, and that's why only the end sections are low floor in Sheffield. It's also why they ride a hell of a lot better. But Blackpool are four-wheelers. I'm not sure about this, I think Nottingham are four-wheelers. Certainly the newer ones in Nottingham are four-wheelers. And all these places where there's basically 5-section cars, or 7-section cars, which I think they are in Edinburgh, they are all four-wheelers, basically joined together by a tow bar, that they've laid a floor on the tow bar and put sides and a roof on and called it another section. And that's why these sections are so incredibly short. But in Blackpool, what you've got is you've got 3 four-wheeled trams joined together, basically. And because they're four-wheelers, and because there's a lot of overhang at either end of the bogie, because the four-wheel truck, the wheels can't be that far apart because it's got to get around the corners, so the wheelbase can't be very long. So you've got a section of tram that is that long, running on a wheelbase like that. And that's why they pitch and rock and roll and bang and crash and vibrate. On the day opened, the upgraded Blackpool tramway, I sat with a friend of mine on one of the brand new trams, brand new flex it is, and I sat and I watched screws unscrew themselves out of the floor with the vibrations. You know, there was like a panel in the floor, like a access panel for something, and I was sat there. And if ever you've seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's a bit where the kid gets abducted from the house by the aliens, and the mother is trying to put shutters on all the doors and all the windows and draw the curtains and you know, barricade the house, and there's a close-up of a vent in the floor and a screw coming out by itself. That's exactly what was happening on these brand new Flex City trams. Exactly what was happening, and it was the vibrations that were doing it. And I sat there and watched about 5 or 6 of these screws just unscrew themselves and, boom, and fall over and then roll away on the floor. So, yeah. So, to say they're not very good would be an understatement. Even then, on day one, if you remember, Blackpool Transport used to have a thing called travel cards, whereby you could buy an all-day ticket, and they used to put it in a little wallet, and this little wallet was a piece of card with a bit of sticky back plastic on it, and you peel the sticky back plastic off the card, put the ticket in, and then seal the bit of sticky back plastic back down over it, and because it was sticky, it stuck it down, and you know, and it meant it wasn't just a paper ticket getting dog-eared in your pocket that you were having to show all day. Well, what we used to do on the tramway was anything that broke or fell apart or was a bit loose or something, we used to get the clear plastic bit of these travel card wallets and use it as a band-aid, as a sticking plaster, and stick it across whatever. And these new Flex Cities were covered in these travel card wallets, you know, trying to hold windows shut that were flopping open. Oh, they're just absolutely hopeless. They really are. But you see, they can't go back now. They've got to use them, because otherwise people will be saying, well, why did we give you all this money? Why did you ask us for all this money? And you've bought trams that don't work at God knows how many £1 million. Caused all this disruption in Blackpool for all these years, taken away one of our tourist heritage assets, and Blackpool has got very few assets remaining these days. It cannot afford to lose another one. You know, quite rightly, the people of Blackpool and visitors to Blackpool would be up in arms. And since this thing came out that Jane Cole has said about not running the heritage cars anymore, basically she has backpedalled tremendously. In fact, she's probably going to be the next Prime Minister with the amount of backpedalling and revising her statement that she's been doing. She now said, apparently, that the trams are only on pause and hopefully will be back on the promenade in 2025. Now, what does that mean? That means Jane Cole, who is the manager of Blackpool Transport Services, has had to alter a press release, has had to make a statement after a press release rather, because that press release, that original press release, angered so many people. It shows how good of a manager of a transport undertaking she is, that she's had to amend or make a statement on top of that original press release. A manager worth the salt will not have put that original release out in those words in the first place. They would not have done it. It's as simple as that. It would not have gone out. So why did she either write it, or why did she allow the person who had written it under her to release it? Whichever way you throw it, it's bad management. Basically, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I know this opinion is held by quite a lot of other people as well. I think the sooner Jane Cole stops being a transport manager and goes back to doing whatever she did before she was a transport manager, the better the world would be. I would say we could blast her off into space in one of Elon Musk's rockets. However, I'm led to believe that if we were to do that, aliens would immediately land on Blackpool Promenade, bringing her back, with the statement that they are only looking for intelligent life. So, yeah. So, it's her who's responsible. She now suddenly says nobody is a bigger advocate than me, she says, for our heritage trams. This is in her new statement. Nobody's a bigger advocate than me. Well, I think you'll find all those people who have given their time to drive and crew the heritage trams for free for the last umpteen years. I think you'll find they're a bigger advocate than you, Jane, who's getting paid. All the people at places like Crouch and Beamish and Carlton Colville who are keeping our heritage alive, again, many of them, a huge majority of them unpaid. I think you'll find they're a bigger advocate than you, Jane. All those people who travel hundreds of miles just to ride on a vintage tram. When did you last do that, Jane? I think all those other people are a bigger advocate for heritage trams than you. So yeah, when you say you're the biggest advocate for heritage trams, I think you need to take a look around at the people that are coming with pitchforks for you. Because, trust me, there's an angry mob. and I don't think they're going to be in Blackpool, though. Because I think the angry mob has basically all said, no heritage trams, no Blackpool. I don't know how many times I've read that comment over the last week and a bit, where people have said, oh, so no heritage trams, no reason for me to go to Blackpool anymore. I've read it hundreds of times. How much is it going to damage Blackpool's tourist industry if they don't run the heritage trams? Don't run the flex shitters. Nobody cares. If we got rid of them tomorrow, get rid of them. Flog them to some other unsuspecting soul somewhere. Get rid of them. Bring all the heritage ones back. Yeah, do it. Bring all the heritage ones back. Do what they did in San Francisco, basically, and bought heritage cars from here, there, and everywhere to run what is actually a relatively new service in San Francisco. Go to San Francisco, it gets overshadowed a lot by the cable cars in San Francisco, but there is a brilliant electric tramway that runs all day, every day, using nothing but heritage vehicles built in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s. And they're not talking about upgrading or modernising, because they know damn well it's an asset. The vehicles they've got are an asset. People who want to go to work or whatever can jump on them, but tourists equally jump on them. And having the heritage vehicle is an asset. You might as well use old vehicles that will attract extra ridership rather than modern vehicles that will only attract your commuters but won't attract any tourists. What are you going to do? Plus, it doesn't cost millions and millions and millions of pounds or dollars to buy a heritage tram. You can get them. They are out there. Beamish has got one from Oporto that runs nearly every day. Yeah. So, it's basically a huge own goal by Blackpool Transport. Let's hope they are correct and the heritage service does reappear next year. But let's not have heritage tours. Let's have heritage service. Let's have same price for whatever tram you want to catch in Blackpool, let's have them all running and let the people decide what they want to catch. You get on a Blackpool tram, let's make it a flat fare. You buy a ticket. Let's say, right, you get on a Blackpool tram, it's a £5, it allows you to ride on the tramway all day on whatever you want to ride on, whether that be a modern vehicle or a heritage vehicle. Both types of vehicle are out in service all day. Let's see what the public want to do. Right, and as Dominic quite rightly says in the chat here, says the Isle of Man are running 125-year-old cars, and they're not talking about modern trams at all. And it's a hop, skip and a jump from Blackpool. Yeah. Yeah, the Isle of Man, all their trams, I don't think they've got one that's under 100 years old. I don't think they've got a vehicle on the Isle of Man that's under 100 years old. They might have got an engineering vehicle. They might have got a modern engineering thing, like a Unimog road railer or something like that. They might have got something like that that's modern. But certainly all the service cars on the Isle of Man, they're all over 100 years old now, and a lot of them are very, very, very similar to what used to run in Blackpool. If you look at an Isle of Man enclosed car, you know, one of the boxy things, and look at Blackpool and Fleetwood Box 40, they're almost identical. Look at one of the toast racks on the Isle of Man, and then look at Blackpool and Fleetwood Rack 2, again almost identical, built by the same people, GF Mills. Yeah, because that's what trams were back then. You know, if you ordered your tram in 1880 or 1890, that's what you got. You know, just like now you get a flex shitty. But the difference is, in about 120, 130, 140 years time, how many of these purple caterpillars that are now running about in Blackpool, how many of them will still be around in 120, 130 years time? And if they are around, who will care? Actually, that's not true. Somebody will care, because there will be somebody sort of being born now who will only remember them and go, oh yeah, that's what I remember when I was a kid, and yeah, and somebody will care. Like when the centenaries came into service in Blackpool in the 1980s, everybody hated the centenaries. People used to wave them by, which is why I now know for a fact that people will wave the LRVs by, because people used to wave the centenaries by. We don't want that modern one, we want one of the old ones with a conductor. Let that modern one go. Yeah, but now people do more the end of the centenaries. You see, here's another thing about the upgrade of the Blackpool tramway. They said, oh, we've got to build platforms to make them level loading, and we can't run heritage cars at the platforms because there'll be a gap, because the modern trams are wider, and that's why they built these god-awful things onto the side of what they now call the B-Fleet Blues. Rather than do that and mess about with the balloon cars, what they could have done was just keep the centenaries. Because if you ever get a chance to see a centenary passing one of those platforms, you'll find they match up more or less perfectly. There is no gap, because the centenaries were built to the maximum permissible loading gauge, which is 8 foot something, I think. And there's no gap, basically. There is a step on the centenaries, because there has to be, because they're bogie cars and you've got to go up over the bogie. But you could certainly run them instead of B-Fleet balloons. You could have saved that money that you spent on converting B-Fleet balloons by just running the centenaries, and you could have run the centenaries one-man operated. But of course they had a lot of money and they wanted to spend it because they wanted to make the tramway look not profitable, because basically they want to run buses. That's why they're now trying to get half of Rigby Road to store their new electric buses in. Well, I wouldn't want, if I was running the Heritage Tramway, I wouldn't want new electric buses with flammable batteries sharing my depot. But yeah, interesting, isn't it? I wonder if this depot work will ever get done. Or if something will happen to the depot before it gets done. All I will say at this point is Pleasure Beach, fun house. Right. Dominic said, like on Top Gear, one should be preserved as a warning. I'm not quite sure what that means. But yeah, I mean, you should. Museums often do things wrong. The two things museums do wrong is, one, they often preserve a prototype of something that isn't representative of whatever the thing is, whether it be a tram or a car or a bus or an aeroplane or a teapot or a piece of furniture or whatever. Museums are very good at preserving prototypes or one-offs. They're not so good at saving something that is representative of the masses, sort of thing. And the other thing museums do, they preserve things that people like, and they should preserve things that people don't like as well. And they preserve things that work, and they should preserve things that don't work as well. Yeah, save stuff that doesn't work, save stuff that people don't like, because it's all part of the thing. And if we're not careful, if we only preserve certain things from our past, then generations to come will get a very skewed view of what the past was like, and they won't get the whole picture of it. You see, one of the things that I didn't like about the modern day heritage operation in Blackpool was heritage trams came out about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, trundled about in the sunshine for a bit, and then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon all went back in the depot. Well, that's not what the Blackpool trams are about. And that's why I've hardly been back since the upgrade. Because to me what it's about is the last tram south from Fleetwood at about midnight, with rain hammering on the roof, a howling gale blowing sand sideways and sand blasting you as you wait freezing to death at a tram stop. You get on the tram, it pulls up with its nice high voltage glowing golden lighting. You get on, it's nice and warm inside. Conductor shuts the doors and goes, "Oh crikey, it's a bit parky outside tonight, isn't it, mate?" You have a bit of a laugh and a joke with the conductor. He presses the buzzer, bzz, bzz, and off it goes, wow, 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 and the noise rattling off the shop fronts in Fleetwood High Street. You can't bottle that, and you can't preserve that, and they've not even attempted to do it. I was lucky enough that I experienced it. I remember it. I've told the story before about Mad Albert on New Year's Eve with the last tram from Fleetwood, an OMO car, where he wanted to celebrate New Year, and as the tram was going down the promenade, he got out of the cab, changed his clothes, put his civet, got his uniform off, put his civvies in. The tram's still going down the prom. He gets back in the cab, takes it into Rigby Road depot, shuts it all down, knocks the breaker out, goes out, cashes in, gets in his car to go home, and then realises that he's left about 20 tram enthusiasts completely stone drunk asleep in the back saloon of the tram. It's things like that you cannot you can't preserve in a museum. You know, it's stuff like that only happens in the real world, and that's why it's important that they stay in the real world and don't all end up in a very sanitised environment, places like Christ. I mean, don't get me wrong, Christ does brilliant work at restoring stuff and that. Yeah, fantastic. As do places like Carlton Colville and Beamish and that. But they don't. They preserve the hardware, but they don't preserve the feeling of it. It's a bit like if you had a computer museum and you preserved all these computers, but you didn't keep the software that ran on them. It's a bit like that. Christopher says Melbourne did a similar thing in 2014 because the heritage fleet in Melbourne now can only use pantographs on the rebuilt overhead. Well, that's because they rebuilt the overhead wrong then, Christopher. Yeah, there are different ways of building the overhead. There are different. It's not as simple as trolleys and pantographs because there are different types of trolleys. There are different types of pantographs, some of which work well together, some of which don't. There are other current collectors as well, like bow collectors and stuff like that. Christ does a fairly good job of having a compromise overhead that works with everything. You think about it at Christ. There's vehicles with bow collectors, vehicles with pantographs, vehicles with fixed head trolleys, vehicles with swivel head trolleys, and they all work basically. Blackpool has used fixed head and swivel head trolleys, I believe, in the past. In recent years, certainly in the last 30 years or so, all the trolleys on Blackpool trams have been fixed head, and normally they say fixed head trolleys can't use trolley reversers. Well, they did in Blackpool because they had a special wheel on the fixed head trolley that was bigger than a normal trolley wheel. It was about twice the size of a normal trolley wheel. A normal trolley wheel is about that big, and the ones in Blackpool were that big. And it had a wider, deeper groove in it, with enough play in the groove that it could use a trolley reverser. And that's how the pantograph cars used to get around the trolley reversers on the old North Station route. So yeah, you got me on my hobby horse about the Blackpool trams, but basically I get the feeling that the management of Blackpool Tramway at the moment, I get the feeling they couldn't run the proverbial good time in a brewery. I really do. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they turn it around. I hope they get all the heritage fleet back out in service. I mean, one of the things that they've said is these ODAS cameras that they're fitting to the LRVs aren't fitted to the heritage cars. Well, what these ODAS cameras do basically is they look at the track in front of the tram, and if there's an obstacle in the track, they stop the tram. Well, what's the driver there to do? Yeah, what is the driver there to do? And basically, the driver's been good enough for nearly a century and a half. Basically, the driver's eyes have been good enough for nearly a century and a half. So why all of a sudden are the driver's eyes not good enough to stop a tram? Or is it that the calibre of people that Blackpool Transport are now employing is so low that they can't be trusted to be vigilant and stop a tram? And if that's the case, well then I'd think twice before I ever got on a Blackpool Transport vehicle ever again. Yeah. So is that the case? Why do you need these cameras? I don't think you do. I think it will make the drivers lazy. I think it will make the drivers complacent, and when one of those cameras goes wrong and the driver's not looking because he's playing on his phone or tuning his radio or something like that, then it'll be, oh dear, look what's happened, camera's gone wrong and the driver weren't looking. Yeah, and I think that is certainly a possibility. Look at trains. Look at trains. We now have all these systems on trains to stop them if they pass a red signal, you know, and that. But trains still crash, don't they? Trains still derail. Trains still kill people. So, yeah, you can have too much safety and people become complacent, and I think that's what will happen. I'm just waiting for it. I'm just waiting for it. Manchester, the Manchester tramway regularly has accidents. Regularly, you know, they hit cars hit them. They had a collision with a bus a few weeks back. Yeah, and that's a modern tramway. I don't know if it's got ODAS fitted yet, because that's a new and experimental thing. But they're a modern tramway, but they still have accidents, and you always will. And basically, if you step out in front of a tram, whether that tram be 120 years old or 6 months old, the results are pretty much exactly the same. Dominic says they could, as a compromise, do what Birkenhead and Hong Kong do, and have double deckers which are more modern. They're not actually more modern. Yeah, it's quite complicated, Hong Kong and Birkenhead, because the two trams that you're talking about in Birkenhead there, Dominic, they were actually built in Hong Kong and shipped over, and they were supposed to be new builds in Hong Kong, and they came over for the opening of the Birkenhead tramway, and it was supposed to be a heritage tramway. That was the idea, but they needed modern vehicles to run the day-to-day service because of the hammer they were going to get, because they expected it to be busy day in, day out. So they had these trams built in Hong Kong, and I think what Hong Kong did was refurbish a couple of old trams and send them a couple of old ones, because when they first came over here, they went to Blackpool, and they went in service in Blackpool, Birkenhead 69 and 70 in it, and they were in Blackpool for quite a while, and I don't know if I ever rode on one. I can't remember if I ever rode on one, but I certainly saw them regularly, and got up close to them and had a really good look at them. And at one point, for some reason, I put my hand under the rocker panel, you know, the panel along front to back where it normally says like Birkenhead Corporation tramways. I put my hand up under that at some point. And bear in mind, these trams were brand new and they'd been here for about 6 months at the time I did this. I put my hand under that panel and it felt all flaky, and I grabbed something and big rusty flaky chunks of rust came off in my hand. I thought, this is not new. You know, this rust has been rusting for years to be like this. So I think they sent old bodies, because what Hong Kong does basically is a tram goes into the workshops and gets rebuilt, and when it gets rebuilt, it sometimes, in fact more often than not, gets an entirely new body. It's a bit like London Transport used to do with buses. They take the truck out, because they're four-wheelers in Hong Kong. They lift the body off the truck, take all the controllers, all the electrical gear off, refurbish the truck, refurbish the controllers, refurbish or rebuild excuse me, or rebuild the body, and then put it all back together and send it out again. And I think what Hong Kong did when Birkenhead ordered those two trams, I think they took an old body off a tram that was going through the workshops, they put a new body on the tram that were going through the workshops, and then got a couple of spare bogies and a couple of spare controllers, and married them to the old body, repainted it and sent it to Birkenhead. That's what I think they did. I don't know. And it's very difficult to work out what's what in Hong Kong, because everything's been rebuilt and some things have been totally scrapped and replicas built that look very similar. So it's very hard to work out what's what in Hong Kong these days. But there are a lot of bits of Glasgow tram running in Hong Kong. Christian says all the heritage trams in Melbourne are stopped because they've got trolley poles and they can only use pantographs now. Well, it wouldn't be beyond the wit of man to fit trolley poles. I mean, to fit pantographs rather. All the Blackpool trams, all the heritage trams in Blackpool, except for one particular class, all of them, well, two classes now, because you can count the centenaries as heritage as well now. All except for the pantograph cars and the centenary cars, all had trolley poles, and all were converted to pantographs. And Blackpool Transport, in the days when they had brilliant fitters and that, in the days when Tony DePledge was in charge, Blackpool Transport made their own design of pantographs. They experimented with a couple of railway type pantographs, one of which they got from a company called Brecknell Willis, a single arm pantograph. That didn't work very well for various reasons, so they designed their own pantographs, and they worked very well, and they replaced trolley poles on pretty much everything with pantographs. And it's not a difficult conversion to do, and it is reversible as well, so it's a conversion you can fairly easily do the other way. You can do back again. So if it's a case of you can't run with a trolley pole, then I'd say, okay, well, let's fit a pantograph. In fact, some cars in some parts of the world have a trolley pole at one end and a pantograph at the other, so they can use both. So yeah, that shouldn't be impossible to do. That definitely should not be impossible. But yeah. Dominic says those people in Hong Kong sound like GPO cum grime, refurbishing stuff and sending it back out again. Yeah, I'm fairly sure that's what they did. I'm fairly certain that's what. I can tell you all kinds of stories about Hong Kong. I met an ex-manager of Hong Kong City Tramways a few years ago now. He was retired by the time I met him, a chap called John Salmon. Really nice guy actually, and I went to his flat in Reading. He was moving house basically, and he got a lot of stuff that he wanted to donate to Christ, and I went and picked it up. You know, a lot of paperwork and things that it was donating to the archives there, and I went to his flat and we had a cup of tea and had a chat and that, and he was telling me all kinds of stories about the trams in Hong Kong, all kinds of stories. My favourite one involved the lifeguards. You know, the sort of gate thing in the front of a tram that if somebody falls in front of it, they knock this gate back, that's sort of under the front of the tram, and that unleashes a catch that lets a tray fall down in front of the wheels onto the ground, that theoretically scoops you up so you don't get mangled by the wheels. You know, you don't get chopped into bits by the wheels as the tram goes over you. And they call it a lifeguard system. The gate and things on the thing that drops down. It's a tray that goes from, it's held horizontally, and when the lifeguard gate trips, it just drops like that. And the idea is it scoops you up onto the top of it rather than you go under the wheels. But of course, when it scoops you up onto the top of it, it kind of rolls you along the ground a bit, and there's other things underneath the tram, like the brake rigging and that, you know, that you might bash your head on and that. And because Hong Kong is such a densely populated place, they do get quite a lot of one-unders, you know, people going under the front of trams. And John said one of the big problems that they used to have in Hong Kong was all these people fell under these trams for whatever reason, and then they sued the tramway for damages. Yeah, so the solution that they came up with in Hong Kong was to take the lifeguards off, so that if a tram hit somebody, it killed them, and they couldn't then get up and sue them again. That's the story that John Salmon told me. How true it is, I don't know, but that's what he tells me. Christopher says that Melbourne did have some trams that originally had trolleys and now have pantographs. Yeah, it's not hard to do, Christopher, so I don't really know why they don't do that. But it's a massive own goal for the overhead not to work with trolleys. What do they do for hang on, it's Melbourne, isn't it? Does it get cold in Melbourne in winter? Do you get like -°C? Do you ever get ice in Melbourne? Because one of the big problems with pantograph only operation on tramways is that ice builds up on the overhead wire and can then insulate the pantograph from the overhead, because the overhead is a copper wire. It gets a coating of ice right the way around it. This used to happen a lot in Blackpool. The sea spray and that in the winter came up over the promenade, hit the overhead and froze into the overhead. So if you'd sawn through the overhead wire, what you got would have been like a corn dog with a through the middle was the copper wire, but around it, about an inch all around it, was ice. And of course the pantograph comes along and the ice pushes it down, and then the pantograph's not touching the wire anymore. So the whole thing stops. Or what tends to happen is it tends to cause an arc, which then damages the overhead wire and certainly damages the rubbing plate on the top of the pantograph. And then you have a failure because the pantograph is damaged. So what Blackpool used to do, and did until very recently, was they used to run in winter some trolley fitted trams, just run them up and down to break the ice off the overhead. And some of the trolley wheels, in the groove of the trolley wheel, they were like a knurled wheel in the groove. They got like ridges across, and that helped break the ice. They were called icebreaker wheels, and that's how they got rid of the ice. Now, how you do it in Melbourne, I've got no idea. So you do get ice, but you don't get snow. So how do they break the ice off the overhead then? Or have they not had that problem yet? Have they not been 100% pantograph fitted long enough to experience the problem of not having trolleys to break the ice yet? Because it'll happen, that will. It'll happen. It'll certainly happen. Ice is a big problem. As Dominic will tell you on the railways as well, on the electric railways, ice is a massive problem. Right, anyhow, crikey, what time is it? Crikey, it's 8:30. Almost time for me to turn back into a pumpkin. Well, that is about it, I think, for this week, and indeed almost for this year. We are taking a break next week. We're not going to be on next week, but we will be back, as I say, at some point on Christmas Eve. Now, I can't tell you exactly when we're coming back on Christmas Eve, so for now, hit the like and the subscribe thing. I hate doing that because all YouTubers go, oh, hit like and subscribe, but yeah, you really do need to do it. Hit the subscribe thing and make sure you turn the notifications on so you know when we're on Christmas Eve. I have a feeling it'll probably be sometime mid-afternoonish, but I'm not certain. Dominic says, I'll be interested to see if they run into trouble first in Blackpool without heritage trams. Yeah, I think they will, because you see, Blackpool kept a couple of trolley-fitted balloons for a very long time, and they were also the balloons that they used to fit snowplows to. Now, where they're going to run into real trouble is snow ploughing, because they used to have a couple of balloons every winter, at least one of which they've kept, one of which was 701, that they used to fit a snowplow to every single winter, and those balloons were on standby in the depot for snow ploughing duties. And if it had a trolley as well, ice breaking duties. 710 had a trolley. So 710 went from being trolley fitted to being pantograph fitted, then had a trolley put back on it at one point. One of the reasons it had the trolley fitted, it was painted in the heritage livery. That was part of the reason it had a trolley put back on it. But another reason it had a trolley put back on it was for ice breaking duties in the winter. So what they'll do now, they've got no heritage trams running, is anybody's guess. But they have removed the trolleys from a lot of the heritage fleet. I've noticed that the Western train has now got a pantograph. You know, that was restored using heritage lottery money and that back to its original Western train 1960s condition, and as it was restored had a trolley, but they've recently put a blooming pantograph on that, and it does look a mess on that because they've built a silly little thing on the roof. But yeah, I mean, that ought to have kept a trolley. Dominic says, I'll see if I can share photos of the canal around Thorn in the new year. Yeah, excellent idea, Dominic. In fact, we might even be up there at some point with Alan's boat. Perfect day. Like I say, it was based at Thorn for a few weeks, back end of last year. Yeah. Christopher said one tram's had a trolley pole in Melbourne for ice on the overhead, but I've not seen it in use. Yeah, well, they'll need one. It'll be interesting to see what happens, won't it? You see, this is the sort of thing that Jane Cole and her friends will not know about. So, this is the kind of specialist knowledge that the people who've worked with those heritage trams and that for years and years and years know, but management people don't know. So, and particularly new management people who've not got much experience and that, they don't know. So yeah, I think they may well come unstuck. But how do the other networks do it? How do the other modern tramways do it that have got all pantograph fitted vehicles? Well, I think the thing is, those other places are not Blackpool, you know, so they don't get that build up of ice on the overhead, because they've not got the sea constantly wetting the overhead. Like, it's a bit like when you dip a bit of string into hot wax and keep dipping it in, and eventually it's wide enough to be a candle. It doesn't happen in other places where they've built modern tramways, you know, because they're all inland. You know, a bit of rain might do it, but it doesn't tend to rain at the same time as it's freezing, does it? So it's not a problem in other places. I think it's a problem that is, I'm not saying it's unique to Blackpool, but it's much more of a problem in Blackpool than it is anywhere else. So it will be interesting to see what happens. It's something they've not thought of, I'm fairly certain. As I sit here having thought about this, I'm thinking to myself, nobody's mentioned this. And also about the snowplows, nobody's mentioned that, but I think they can fit a snowplow to. I think a Unimog has got a plough on, hasn't it? One of the Unimogs got a plough. I know one of them's got a brush for brushing sand. One of the Unimogs for brushing sand off the tracks. Has it got a snowplow they can fit as well? I don't know. But yeah, we'll see, aren't we? We'll see what happens over the next few months. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I think it's going to be one to watch. I think there's going to be some more backpedaling going on from Blackpool Transport fairly soon. But the thing is this: if they really did need to withdraw the heritage trams for a period of time to fit some kind of equipment to bring them up to modern safety standards, all they needed to do was do a press release that said something like, at the end of October or at the end of November, all our heritage services will temporarily be withdrawn while we bring the fleet up to modern standards to ensure their future for many, many years to come. We hope you will understand this break in the service, and we will see you on our heritage trams once again next summer. That's all they needed to write. It would have solved all this hoo-ha. That's all they needed to do. But they didn't, did they? And that's why I say they're fairly incompetent, it would seem. Which is a shame. As we often say in the tramway preservation business, nice trams, shame about the owners. Right, that really is it for another day. If we don't see you on Christmas Eve, have a fantastic Christmas, everybody. I will be doing my normal Scrooge Bar humbug bit and trying to avoid it as much as possible, but we will be here at some point, as I say, on Christmas Eve. Make sure you hit that notification thing that is around somewhere. It's either up there or down there or wherever the hell it is these days, to get yourself notified on Christmas Eve. Even make sure you're still subscribed as well, because YouTube does unsubscribe people sometimes. A bit naughty is YouTube. So we will see you back here, live and direct, hopefully well de-iced on Christmas Eve. But from us for now, have a great one.